Hi everybody and welcome to this craft and teaching event co-sponsored with the Islamic Studies Workshop titled Studying Religion in Iran Between University and Seminary. Please continue to get coffee and make yourself at home and comfortable. If you haven't yet, please sign in on the computer to get craft and teaching credit or just to say hello to us. Before I turn it over to Professor Usar, just a couple of announcements. First, this upcoming Monday, we're having an event called Using Images to Teach Religion. That's Monday at 4:30 with Karin Hawzah in Switch 201. She'll be explaining how she uses imagery and big words like this in the classroom. And then our final event of the year is the annual Philosophy of Teaching Statement Workshop with Bill Rando. That'll be on Tuesday, December 1st in the Martin Center Library. That's for anybody thinking about who they are as a teacher going forward. If you've already put together a statement, it's a great opportunity to come and work through it again, to rethink it. And if you haven't, but you'd like to teach at some point in the future, it's a great time to start thinking about what that means to be a teacher. So any questions or issues, please feel free to email us at thecraftofteaching@uchicago.edu, or you can find that through our website, which is just on the Chicago website. And that's it for me. So now I'll turn it over to Professor Usar to introduce our panel.
Thank you, Marshall, and thanks to the Craft Teaching Program and the Islamic Studies Workshop for helping co-sponsor this. I'm really delighted to be moderating this event today. The title is Studying Religion in Iran Between University and Seminary. I'll just say very briefly why this topic interests me myself. There's a very self-interested connection that I have to this topic. And then I'll introduce our guests and turn it over to them to speak for about 10-15 minutes each, and then we want to hopefully save a lot of time for conversation and questions and comments from you. So I learned about the University of Religions and Denominations, which all three of our guests are from, about, I want to say, 6-7 years ago. This is the university itself styles itself as the only university exclusively dedicated to the study of religion, and doing a kind of a comparative study of religion rather than sort of a seminary-based or apologetic type of religious scholarship. I'm personally interested in the ways in which different institutions have been approaching the study of religion and have been conceptualizing religion as a topic within Iran, partly because I'm interested as an anthropologist in the ways in which different institutions and different kinds of intellectual movements have approached the production of knowledge. So I have an upcoming project on various attempts to conceptualize the social sciences in Iran in Islamic terms. There are philosophical attempts that have been going on for some time to think about whether we can have something called an Islamic social science. There are bureaucratic kind of processes that have been ongoing since the Islamic Revolution in 1979 that include sort of shifting the way universities are structured, syllabi, hiring practices, and so on, and firing practices, as well as practical attempts. So the ways in which some sociologists, anthropologists, other social scientists have been actually attempting through their own practice to engage in a form of Islamic social science, right? And then the way these things kind of interconnect with one another, not always comfortably. So I've been really interested in this, and the University of Religions is fascinating to me because it's a system that it's an institution that has emerged essentially out of the efforts of seminary-trained scholars. So you'll hear from our guests about the kind of makeup of the student body and the faculty there, but largely both the faculty and the students, to a large extent, are people who have studied for years in the seminary system, enrollment in other cities. So it's really interesting to see how certain kind of approaches, certain philosophies, certain methods in the study of religion both continue from the Shi'i sort of seminary system as well as undergo certain kinds of transformations, and then how these then speak back to or interact with the seminary style system, because people still go back there, they teach there, they interact with them in all kinds of ways. Sometimes they raise questions or they put forth issues that then scholars who are more squarely situated within the seminary feel like they need to respond to. So there's all kinds of interesting dynamics that emerge from that. I'll just introduce our guests now and then turn it over to them. Naeimeh Pourmohammadi, who's in the center seat here, is assistant professor of philosophy of religion at the University of Religions and Denominations. She studied at the Zahra, which is one of the major centers for women's Shi'i seminary studies in Qom. Later, she obtained a PhD in Islamic philosophy and theology from the Islamic Hawzah University. Her doctoral dissertation was titled A Comparison of Theological Attitudes of Early Ash'arites and Kierkegaard in Faith and Ethics. Dr. Pourmohammadi has published widely in Persian as well as in English and Arabic on comparative theology, philosophy, and ethics. Her published articles include works on Ash'arite theology, Kierkegaard's ethics, occasionalism, Christian theodicy, and many other topics. Fatima Tawfiqi, on the far right, or on your left, is also assistant professor, but she's in women and religion. She also studied at the Jamiat al-Zahra in Qom before going on to obtain a PhD in literature and theology from the University of Glasgow, Scotland. Her doctoral dissertation was titled The Portraits of the Apostle, Paul of Tarsus, and the Rise of Modern Europe. I'll just read the titles of a few of her articles to give you a sense of the range of her interests. This is both in English and Persian. So she published an article titled Unveiling Pauline Women in Modern Europe. Another one is titled Corinthian Women in Pauline Rome, Feminism and Political Liberation. And she also has an essay called Children of God in the Quran and the Bible. This one I believe in Persian. And then our third guest, Mahdi Salehi, is a PhD student in comparative theology and also director of international relations and cooperation at this University of Religions and Denominations. He studied in the Qom Seminary for over a decade, if I understand it correctly, right? Before he embarked on his PhD studies. His principal research interest has to do with the ways in which theology is deployed in modern interfaith dialogue, particularly between Christians and Muslims. And this is something that he's pursued both as a research interest, but also something that he's participated in himself actively as a kind of program that he's been contributing to. So please welcome our guests. I'll turn it over to Dr. Pourmohammadi.
In the name of God, hello. Thank you very much, Mr. Nisar, for inviting us, and thank you very much for coming. It's an honor to be with you and to discuss with you. I want to present a very short introduction of Seminary School in Qom. Seminary School in Qom, as you know, the modern Seminary School in Qom is founded 100 years ago by Abdul Karim Hawari Yazdi, and also the current Seminary School in Iraq is founded by Ayatollah Sistani. And it doesn't mean that before that we didn't have seminary school, but it's about the modern time. The system of teaching in hawzah seminary school in Qom is like this, that it is divided into two levels, introductory level and primary level and higher. In primary level, clergymen study at least 12 sciences, 12 Islamic sciences, like Islamic philosophy, falsafa, jurisprudence, fiqh, traditions, hadith, theology, kalam, evaluation of biographies, ilm al-rijal, Islamic mysticism, irfan, logic, mantiq, language studies, ilm al-lughah, and interpretation of the Quran, tafsir, history of Islam, tarikh, Quranic sciences, ulum al-Quran, and usul al-fiqh, principle of jurisprudence. These 12 Islamic sciences are taught in primary level of hawzah. And in high level, they just focus on jurisprudence and principles of jurisprudence, to be mujtahid, to be someone who is expert for deriving Islamic laws, Islamic rules from the sources. And something that is very interesting is that everybody who enters hawzah, enters seminary school, can be a mujtahid, can be an expert who is allowed to derive Islamic laws from the sources. And it's very interesting, and I think, as far as I know, it is a main important difference between the seminary school in Shia, Islamic Shia, and the seminary school, for example, in Christianity or Judaism. Everybody who enters hawzah can study Islamic sciences in a critical way, in an analytic way, and he can have for himself or herself his or her own idea, and if he or she can reach into the top level of hawzah, he or she can be a mujtahid and can have some followers. And maybe the style of life in seminary school is attractive for you. The style of life in seminary school is something like this, that they live with each other, especially in the primary level. They live with each other in some places which is called hujra, and they discuss with each other, which is called mubahasa, and also they invite each other to be a pious person, to be a very good person and reach a very good character. So this living with each other can help them to reach to the top level, to be a mujtahid. Because in order to be someone, in order to be a mujtahid, needs two qualities. One of them is justice, good character in morality, to be a pious person, and the other is knowledge. So they live with each other, all the time they discuss, and they can be a knowledgeable person, and also they try to do Islamic practice better and better. So this system of life and system of teaching draws them to be closer more and more to the top level of ijtihad. And also we have Islamic Seminary School for Women, which I myself are coming from. Before revolution, Islamic Seminary School for Women, we had some seminary schools, but after Islamic Republic revolution of Iran, they are these kinds of seminary for women. They are under the management of Seminary School of Men. But still, we have some seminary school for women that are not depending on seminary school of men. For example, Zahra, which I studied there, and the levels of study for women have 4 levels: level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. It is allowed for them to be a mujtahid like men, but practically and normally there are not so many women that reach to that level. And the other point that I want to tell is the interactions between universities and seminary schools. After the revolution, there are some interactions between seminary schools and universities. The managers of the seminary schools think that it's very good that they found some centers or some universities which is especially for clergymen, and they can study their humanities besides Islamic studies. It can help them to connect with the modern world. And which our University of Religions and Denominations, is one of them. Some of these places are just wanting to study humanities, but some of them wants to Islamicize humanities, wants to the process of Islamization of humanities. And the other side of this interaction is the side of universities after the revolution. The universities also found some departments which their duty is study Islamic sciences. Before that, in our university, we didn't have these kinds of departments. For example, the department Islamic philosophy, department of jurisprudence and the principles of jurisprudence, and the department of Qur'anic sciences. And I think the effect of foundation of these departments in university is that hawzah seminary school got familiar with the new methods, the universal methods, university methods of university. For example, when I was in seminary school in Zahra, I learned Islamic philosophy, but I just read the text of Mullah Sadr, the text of Ibn Sina. We were just focusing on the text, no analytic, no criticizing, no historical way, no comparison. But when I went to university for learning Islamic philosophy, the methods are something different, not just focusing on the text, but we studied Islamic philosophy historically and comparison between Islamic philosophy and Western philosophy, and somehow critically and with the focusing on the subjects, on the questions, not just text. And I want to mention the connection between modernity and the study of religion in seminary schools and university, but I think in some other opportunity I discuss.
You have 5 minutes.
You don't want to use the rest of your 5 minutes?
No.
No? Okay.
Are we going to be able to ask some
Yes,
questions
yes.
afterwards?
Yeah.
Thank you for coming, and thank you, Professor Gustav, and also to the different departments and workshops that are like for organizing this workshop. Actually, I'm a bit following up on what she was talking about, and like she chose not to say, which is about modern questions that showed up. Since almost 100 years ago, many countries in the Middle East and North Africa, many Muslim countries, faced some modern questions while they were facing like modernity in technological terms, but also in philosophical and intellectual realms. So the main area of focus was religion. And so these modern questions found different answers, and we are still experiencing the consequences of those answers and what happened to the Muslim world and Muslims after they tried to solve some of those problems in acceptable or not so acceptable ways. Iran likewise has had this encounter, but especially after the revolution, it became very important because now it wasn't like before the revolution you had the secular government, but the religious institution was like almost separate. And so they could decide for themselves. But then, while preparing for the revolution and also after the revolution happened, many of those religious leaders were the key figures in the government, so they really had to find different answers, and soon very important debates started in the country. For example, before the revolution, even in religious circles, many people avoided doing philosophy. But many people who were very prominent in the Iranian Revolution were philosophers, were engaged in doing Islamic philosophy. And so now philosophy became a very important part of the curriculum in seminaries. It was also very important in religious circles, and they felt that they could answer many of their questions in philosophy. And that's why philosophy of religion is one of the most important branches of religious studies in both seminary and universities in Iran. There were also religious intellectuals from outside the seminaries who also worked on philosophy of religion. One of the very famous examples is Abdul Karim Soroush, who, because he was very active in attacking Marxism, and because he had studied in the UK, he was very much influenced by the philosophy of science, by Karl Popper's philosophy, and he introduced Popper and much of analytic philosophy to Iranian religious circles. And so Popper is very popular, and analytic philosophy is also very popular. Continental philosophy of religion is not as popular as analytic philosophy of religion. So many people are familiar with Reformed epistemology of like Alan Plantinga and others, but continental philosophy of religion is not very popular, although continental philosophy has been very influential in Iran. So you find interesting work being done in universities and also in important institutes which do analytic philosophy, like institutes for fundamental research, where many of the scholars are not confining themselves to analytic philosophy per se, but also to philosophy of religion. Another branch which was very important is sociology of religion. A very important figure in Iranian Revolution, who can even be called the ideologue of the Iranian Revolution, Ali Shariati, had studied sociology in France, and his work is not like rigorously sociological. He tried to find like he was inspired by sociologists as well as existential philosophers, but he was very influential. But his influence in sociology was not directly felt until a bit later. He was especially, let's leave him aside, but then later debates on secularization, which are really important in sociology of religion, are also seen in Iranian media and in Iranian press. So, and also people are doing sociological work. It's mostly in the departments of sociology in universities rather than departments of religious studies, but also in our university, which my colleague is going to introduce shortly, we do sociology of religion using qualitative and quantitative methods of research. For example, they tried to find different ways to see how religiosity works in Iran. And although Iran is a much smaller country than the U.S. and with less population, but it is rather diverse in its own way. It may look rather homogeneous to an American eye, but it is diverse in its own way. So people find how this religious diversity works, how religious practice and belief is influenced by like different waves of secularization or modernization that are happening in the country. The other field is anthropology of religion. I'm sure Professor Destard can introduce that better, how it happens in Iranian universities. But there are people who do that, like they go to different groups and study them. They try to study how pilgrimage or how mourning ceremonies in Iran are being done, and so on. There are also important historical studies being done, both in seminaries and in the universities, and they try to see how doctrine and also legal issues have changed over time, how it wasn't like this all the time, and how gradually like certain doctrines entered mainstream Islam, or certain legal issues were raised that didn't exist before. So you can find that in publications in Iran as well. But there are also shortcomings, very important shortcomings, I believe, in both Iranian and university and seminary systems of religious studies. One major problem is that I would have liked it to be more interdisciplinary, like people trying to solve a question from different aspects, from different disciplines. One other major problem is the problem of languages. Like when they study different religions, they should be more rigorous with studying languages. When they work on Judaism, Christianity, or Hinduism and Buddhism, that should be more important. I would have liked the Iranian scholarship on other religions to be more rigorous, because as my colleague will tell you shortly, in our University of Religions, as well as in other universities, we are studying like Judaism, Christianity, Eastern religions, and different religions around the world as much as our capacities allow. So I believe that their studies on different religions could be more rigorous, and have yet to be more rigorous. Another problem is that scholarship in religious studies is rather diverse. For example, when it comes to theology, you have certain material that are very important in German universities, while others are more important in American universities. Certain trends are more popular in certain parts of the world than others. So this diversity should be acknowledged in Iranian academia as well. And there are other problems. I believe that international links should be further promoted, and internationalization should be encouraged more than it is now. Much of the research that is being done in Iran is confined to the Iranian audience, while I believe that a larger audience in the world should be recognized. And it's not only like they shouldn't look at the literature in Iran, but the literature around the world should be considered when working on certain topic. It shouldn't be confined to translating certain material from Western universities, rather active production should be promoted. And interestingly enough, although Iranian Revolution has been very much influenced by much of ideological trends in the West and East, interestingly, you find the lack of ideological criticism in many of departments of religious studies. It's many times directed at the world of ideas and thought, and they don't get the chance to see the material influences on religion and economic influences on religion. And actually, you wouldn't expect it from Iranian audience, but perhaps they find that academia is not the place to think of that, while it shouldn't be like that. The other problem is that many times their research is confined to libraries, while they don't get much chance to, for example, visit a synagogue or go to a church. They visit it, but it's not like living with the people. While the research would have been more productive if they could live with the followers of a certain religion. Actually, I'm also done before my 5 minutes.
It seems like my paper just stop. Just do it at the 15 minutes.
Yeah, I'm surprised. Yeah, but I'm done.
Okay, thank you, first of all, for coming here. I wanted to say something about University of Religions and Denominations and all. First of all, I want to say that we have two kinds of university in Iran, okay? Governmental university, that the president of these universities are selected by Ministry of Education. With the university, that the main office of this university is concentrated in Tehran, capital of Iran, okay? But have a president, also he is in Tehran, and many branches in other cities in Iran. Also the third one, that UAD, your University of Religions and Denominations, is belonging to this kind, is non-governmental universities that they establish in any city. Maybe just some of scholars decide to found a university. Just they need permission from Ministry of Education, and maybe just one office in every city, okay? University of Religions and Denominations start his work as a library as a small library. The founder of the university, Mr. Naeimeh, was a clergyman that had many trips to other countries, and he believed that many misunderstandings and many challenges in the world is because of religion, because of misunderstanding between religions. He suggested to some of his colleagues, some of the other clergymen, that we need to found a center for knowing other religions as they think, not as we think. So imagine that in Rome, they want to establish a university, that he want to invite some professors from other religions to come and teach and study, to teach to clergymen about other religions, about Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, and other Islamic denominations. So after about 10 years, they work as a research center, so just they study and research about other religions, and they wanted to accept some clergymen to come at the center, at this research center, and know more and more about other religions.
What year? What year you're talking about?
About 20 years ago. Okay, they founded as a research center. About 10 years ago, they wanted to expand this center as a university, and they wanted to transfer this knowledge to other clergymen. But the Ministry of Education in Iran said that also you can accept some non-clergymen, some other students in your university, it's okay. But they wanted to, the main target was training some clergymen for knowing about other religions. We have 5 faculty at this university. Faculty of Religion, it have 3 majors. Is Religion Studies, Abrahamic Religion Studies, and a Study of Religion. Okay? And Faculty of Shia Studies, Faculty of Islamic Denomination, Faculty of Philosophy, Faculty of Women and Family. Okay, Women and Family, of course, it's 2 University, Women and Family and Philosophy is a new faculty at this university. The major of is, for example, in Faculty of Family and Women is Women in the Religions, also Gender Studies, and the last one is Women Rights in Islam. So it's related to this university, the topics of this faculty. They invite many professors from other religions, for example, Christian professors, Jewish professors. Every Thursday we have a Jewish professor at our university. He comes from the Jewish community from Tehran, okay, at this university and teaches rituals and philosophy and theology of Judaism. Also, sometimes we invite some professors from other countries in Christian theology. Of course, it is a joint program with this university, and we have a good connection between some universities in Germany, and every year some groups from Germany come this university and also from this university to go to Germany. Another point that we have more than 200 books published about other religions. Many books translated from about Christianity, Judaism, and other religions, and without any notes, without any criticism, without any critic notes, just for research. And one of the main books that we translated is City of God of Augustine, also Catechism of Catholic Church. Maybe you know that Cardinal Turan, the head of Interpretology in Vatican, wrote an introduction for this book, and also they held a ceremony in Vatican for open air, yeah?
Launching the book.
Launched the book in Vatican, and they were very surprised when we translated this book, and they say, okay, it was very strange for us that you translated catechism. But we need these books because we wanted to know about other religions. It's necessary for us to translate these books. Imagine that this university is founded at home, okay? At home. Home is the center of Shia and Quran. And many variety thinking in home, there are many variety of thinking in great clergymen have many ideas about study other religions, because Iran have more than 97% of people of Iran are Muslims, are Shia. Okay, why? Why is it necessary for us to know, for example, the clergymen, they don't need to know about other religions. And also some of them are happy with it. So it was very hard to convince some of the protestants of this university to, for example, invite some other professor from other religion to teach Christianity for clergymen, to teach Judaism for clergymen. And they said, we are worried about it. Maybe, for example, some of the students maybe convert to other religions. And so, but the founders of this university wanted to convince them, but we have also now we have variety of thinking and maybe some problems about this idea. But the founder of this university also his colleague wanted to continue, and I think we are successful at this short time, just 2 decades. We established this university, and he believed, the founder of the university believed that if we can find if we can change the mind of clergymen, we can change the mind of people about other religions, about coexistence, about peace. I hope.
It's done too.
Yeah. I don't know. Of course, it was between 10 and 15 minutes. It's all right. And
We have lots of questions.
yeah, but I think I don't know what is in your what you have idea. I think it's better that you continue with your questions. Okay.
I'm going to take questions, and then I will allow you can either direct them to specific speakers, or you can just allow whoever wants to answer. Because this is a craft of teaching seminar, I want to emphasize the pedagogical point, which is I want students to ask questions first. So I'll let the first 4, perhaps 5 questions come from students, and then we can open it up to everybody. Yes.
I have 2 questions. The first is, can you tell us more about the background of students that study at the university? Are they all clergy, classically trained, or are there students that might come from other universities that haven't gone the system? And the second question is, can you tell us more about maybe some of the tensions that exist between the university and the hawzah system, the teachers, the faculty, the students? What kind of challenges are you working with in that regard?
Who would like to answer?
So first they started with clerics. The students and professors were from the clerics, but now it's open to everybody. But mostly because it's in Qom, many of the clerics are interested in the university, and the majority are clerics who have studied hawzah for a while, and now they pursue their studies in masters and PhD at this university. The other, are you talking about tensions between universities in general, or this particular university and the hawzah? This particular university?
I'm interested in generally specifically.
Yeah, okay. So what my colleague mentioned about this important idea after the revolution, which is the union between the hawzah and the university. And they wanted both to be influenced by each other and learn the positive points from each other. Whether or not they have been successful is another question, but many times very important courses in Islamic studies were introduced in universities, and also hawzah learned how to be more systematized and its management changed. And the credit system, exams, and the way they are evaluated, the evaluations in hawzah changed after they tried to learn from the universities. But there are certain things that are specific to hawzah or the university. The universities are meant to be a place for secular studies, although there is this process that Professor Dustar mentioned, that this process of Islamization, but still much of it is secular. While in hawzah, it's not only knowledge that counts, as my colleague also mentioned, that there is this thing that you also find in perhaps medieval literature, that is knowledge and virtue together that help you to become the best expert. And also the way they live together, the way they discuss the material, their textbooks are a bit different, but they're mostly similar. And that they get on well in recent decades, in the last 3 decades. They get on rather well.
Yes.
Thank you for your interesting talks. I was particularly fascinated by the fact that you have these different religions being studied in the city of Qom, which is traditionally known as a very conservative city. And I was wondering if you have any thoughts on how we as academic people, or how can we extend this idea of coexistence and diversity in the society? So that,
You have to make pieces on this.
نمی‌دونه ما میگن خود ما کسی که توی دانشگاه هستیم و نه فقط توی کلی
ما چجور دیدن رو گسترش بدیم.
Okay. As I mentioned, that the clergymen have a very powerful, very strong authority for changing the mind of people about their thinking about other religions, okay, and about coexistence like this. So this university wanted to concentrate at clergymen, or this thinking of the clergymen. So more than 60% of the students of this university are clergymen. And gradually we are graduating from the university, and go to maybe some other cities, and so some of them I know that they found some NGO and they want to expand and extend this idea in other people, and I think it's not we can't reach very soon. We have time for it. Of course, the Shia community has a very close thinking about others. I think it's different, but because of environment, because of
اما به خاطر اینکه بیشتر مردم مسلمانن و کمتر ماینوریتی ها رو درک کردن، شاید نیاز باشه که بیشتر بهشون انتقال داده بشه اینجور چیزها. و الا معمولا به لحاظ چیزی شیعه یک مقداری باز هست در مورد به رسمیت شناختن دیگر.
جامعه یا منظورتون علما هست؟
من منظورم علما هستم. نمیتونم بگم صدقه.
So you're saying that among the scholars, it seems like there is more of an openness to accept religious diversity, but then there's this issue of society being predominantly Muslim and not having experience with other religious minorities, and so that Mr. Saleh thinks that transmitting information and knowledge about other religious communities can open up minds among ordinary people about religious minorities as well. Is that pretty much what you were trying to say?
I don't know.
That's exactly my question. Like, I know that scholars are tolerant towards other minorities, but I mean, I was just wondering if you have any thoughts on how this can go beyond this and go through society.
We want to our university just as a center, as an institute for the studies, okay? The studies, and I think when this gradually this idea expanded with the graduation of this university, I think maybe in future we reach a good level for transferring this idea to others, okay?
میخوام بگم همینه دیگه، یعنی در واقع بعد از اینکه اینها اونقدر زیاد بشن فارغ التحصیل ها میتونن تحصیل خودشون بگذارن دیگه. یعنی
yeah, he thinks it's basically a cumulative process where increasingly as you have graduates from these universities moving out into society, then these ideas of religious tolerance.
همینطور با مجلات و کتابایی که داره به سرعت داره منتشر میشه از طرف این
as they publish more books and more articles, more magazines. Yes.
So I apologize if you already responded to the question. I thought you just had different babies, but my question is, well, I know that this university started off with, you said with a mission to expose clergymen to different religions, different ways of thinking about religion. And I've had, the privilege of being able to work with this university and stuff at years. And something that I noticed was a lot of the people who were graduating, just like yourself, ended up going back into the university system. And to what extent are, these clergy who are now getting PhDs having an effect in hawzah, or the scholarship, the publications that are coming out of the university affecting discussions, or even the way that people within the clergy look at hawzah? Or do you feel like more than anything, it's the movement of hawzah in kingdom of the university system, and the conversations then in isolation reading back into the hawzah and checking maybe the way that Narajah asked certain questions. That's one question. And another question that I should I ask that later? Should I just
Save that for you.
Okay, don't be biased against him.
So perhaps I can answer and then you can continue if you like. It's not always that they go back to university. It's not always the case that they go back to universities. They may go back to, like he mentions, to establish NGOs or to become like.
So what does that mean? Like, could you explain?
You explain more about NGOs?
What about teachers? Do they become high school teachers of religion?
Yeah, they could be, or they could go back to the seminaries or institutions that are related to seminaries. And then, they have all these ideas that they were not thinking about. Like, it was already mentioned that because the society is very homogenous, so when they don't ask certain kinds of questions, but then when they come to this institution, they encounter these questions, they see things differently about Judaism and Christianity, and they learn that, all those things that they were thinking about, Judaism, Christianity, or other religions are not as simple as that, and they could be more complicated. Also, in philosophy of religion, sociology of religion, and different topics, it is different. So yeah, they can go back and with new questions, with new topics to think about. And that changes the whole thing. But you can explain more about the NGOs.
ببینید من خالصی میگم آقای دوستان ترجمه کنم. اینطور نیست که من دیگه وارد این بحث نشدم، اما فکر کنم دوباره توضیح بدم. دانشگاه‌های مثل ادیان و حتی چند تا دانشگاه دیگه شبیه اینها این نیست که از فضای حوزویشون جدا شده باشن. همه هیئت علمی ها اینا بیش از 90 شاید بگم 99% هیئت علمی اینجا روحانی هستند.
So I'm just going to be the interpreter here. So Saudi is saying it's not the case that these universities have become completely detached from the seminary system. Even now, 90-something% of the faculty are people who have had seminary education and then they begin teaching in the university.
و در کنار فعالیتشون توی این دانشگاه فعالیت‌های حوزویشون هم همچنان و ارتباطشون اصلا به حوزه قطع نشده.
And as they're participating in these academic university setting activities, that's my son. As they're participating in this, they're not. It's not that they are abandoning their connections with the hawzah. They are still. They're still engaged in their connections and they're still participating with them.
الان تمام برنامه‌هایی که ما تقریبا بیشتر برنامه‌هایی که ما با دانشگاه‌های خارجی داریم وقتی میان یکی از برنامه‌ها رو سعی می‌کنیم دیدار این گروه‌ها و انتقال این فعالیت‌های ما به مراجع تبلیغ باشه.
So one of the things that they always try to do with visiting delegations from other countries, from Germany, Austria, you were telling me, and so on, is in addition to having them come and speak and do events at their university, they also take them to visit some of the marajiks, so some of the high-ranking Shi'i jurists, so that they actually sit down and speak with these people who don't necessarily have a connection with the university. I'm sure. Yes.
Yeah, I was wondering if, as a part of this kind of curriculum for exposure to other religions, is there exposure to kind of Sunni thought, or like could a Sunni cleric come in and give talks in the way that a rabbi might?
She studied Ash'ari theology.
Besides the faculty of religion, we have the faculty of Islamic denominations and also one faculty for the study of Shia. So those two faculties also have some international books, international communication with the Arabic countries, and we have some peers. Yeah.
So if you have speakers coming in, like if we have a, say, Sunni theologian or a Sunni jurist coming in and talking about, let's say, Shafi'i law.
One of the most important aim of this university, as it is written in the mission, mission of the university, is approximation between not different religions but different denominations in Islam. Yeah, and because of this, those two faculties, the most important purpose of them is this approximation between different denominations.
And I want to add something. Okay. Sometimes we invite some talks also from the Sunni community. Like, for example, one talk from Oman about Abbasiyya. Abbasiyya is one of the denominations from the Sunni community. We invited him for teachers about his denomination. About 2 months, I think, we teachers about it. Also, we have some Sunni students in our university.
Francesca?
Okay, my question is for the whole panel. I wanted to ask about the curricula generally. What kind of courses do you teach? Are the syllabi more or less preset, or do you have the freedom to develop your own courses and topics that you're choosing? And then related to that, what are the kind of classes that you most enjoy teaching, or the ones that present you most challenges?
I started teaching last year, and I have taught theories of religion, history of Christianity, history of Judaism, and which also contains like texts and doctrines and stuff. It's not about history, so it's like, let's say, Christian studies. And I also, this semester, I teach gender and sacred texts in the faculty of women's studies, women and religion, where we focus on different interpretations of text and how they have developed over time and how a feminist interpretation would look like and so on. So yeah, like you already know, many of the students come from this conservative background. Many of them have studied in hawzah, and they may have conservative ideas about women's status, but they also know that there are modern challenges, and they have these options available, like feminist approaches in interpretation. That's the course I'm very much interested in, and I enjoy it a lot. There are like 4 doctoral students, and they are all women, and they all have their own ideas. And I just tell them, see how diverse your interpretations are, and they could be as diverse in a way. I have also a hermeneutics class. I also teach biblical interpretation, where I focus on different modern and postmodern approaches and methods in interpretation. She can explain about how this is.
5 years ago, I was accepted by the University of Washington to be an assistant professor. At first, I was a faculty member in the Department of Islamic Denominations, because I have done my PhD on comparison between Ash'arites and Kierkegaard. So in that department, I was teaching Ash'arites and Maturidi, and also some courses in translation the text, English text related to Ash'arites.
And let me add that there are schools of theology in Sunni Islam.
Yeah, right. And after that, when the Faculty of Philosophy is founded in our university, because I am very interested in philosophy of religion, I changed my job into that department, and now I am the faculty member of the Department of Philosophy of Religion, and some of my course is the arguments for the existence of God. I translated one book by Michael Hammer into Persian. the question of God. The title is the question of God. It is it has a critical look over the arguments, classical arguments for the existence of God, and this source book we studied in this course, and the other course is relationship between reason and religion. The other course is the problem of evil. At evaluation, the arguments against the existence of God. The most important argument is the argument problem of evil and problem of giddenness. And also translation of the text, English text, is ready.
I'm going to open it up now. I'll reserve the spot for you after some more people ask questions. I'll ask my question, and then we can have others from the floor. So this can go to anybody. Within the Islamic tradition, we of course do have a long tradition of understanding or studying other religions. It's primarily through the lens of heresiography, right? So I wonder two things. One, to what extent, so there is this tradition of heresiography. Modern study of religion takes a more relativistic stance and says, we don't pronounce judgment per se, to the extent that we're doing sort of critical study of religion rather than from within a particular tradition. We don't take a particular stance. We look at similarities, differences. We explain as much as we can, and so on. So one question is do you have to balance something like this at the University of Religions, where you have to explain to others that are, let's say, the kind of work that we do, we are not interested in heresiography, that's one possibility. Or B, in fact, the kind of knowledge that we produce could be useful for heresiographical approaches, even if we were not engaged in that ourselves. So that's one part of the question. And then the second part is, to what extent does the view of sort of, this is a problematic term, but sort of more kind of conservative sections of the hawzah, to what extent does their view of the University of Religions and the kinds of work that it does depend on whether what they're doing is or is not useful for heresiography?
Is more involved in University of Apologetics. Perhaps you could answer that. آیا وقتی میخوام بخواستم از دانشگاه باید بگید که اینو ما بخوام در این بحث مثلا خاص دشمن‌ها رو یا بدعت‌گذارا رو تشخیص بدیم؟
حالا نه لزوما بدعت‌گذار، ولی مثلا ما متون چیز داریم فرق شیعه. درسته؟ خب فرق شیعه یکی از کاری که داره میکنه اینه که میگه همون فرقی که درست رفتن رو توضیح بده دیگه، و خب این فرق شناسی چیزی بوده که تو سنت اسلامی وجود داشته. درست؟ یعنی خب شما اگر بحث‌های مسیحا رو متوجه نشید نمیتونید جوابش رو بدید. خب سوالم اینه که تا چه حد شما الان تو دانشگاه اونجوری که خود دانشگاه خودش رو تعریف میکنه میاد میگه مثلا ما کارمون میتونه مفید ولی این هم باشه، یعنی که نمیگه اصلا ما فلسفه‌مون یه چیز دیگه است، ما فلسفه‌مون بیشتر درک است. این یک، و دو اینکه آیا تو حوزه افرادی که حالا دیگه مخالف موافق دارن نسبت به دانشگاه تا چه حد نگاهشون به این هست که شما خب دانشی دارید تولید میکنید که ما میتونیم استفاده کنیم برای فرق شناسی و وقت پاسخ دادن، یا مثلا شبهه میدونیم مثلا شبهه شناسی و پاسخ به شبهه و اینجوری.
مطمئنا برای اون گروه هم مفیده، یعنی اون گروهی که میخوان پاسخ بدن و میخوان در مقام دفاع باشن میتونه کتاب‌های ما خیلی مفید باشه برای اونها.
So you're saying that certainly the kinds of knowledge that we produce can be useful also for apologetics and for heresiographical types of scholarship. And I'm sure that they are using them.
اما فلسفه دانشگاه از اول هم خود دانشگاه فلسفه خودش رو این قرار نداده، به خاطر من عرض کردم برای هیچ کتابی حتی یک نوت، یعنی حتی یک نقد نوشته نشده که نوتی ترجمه شده، فقط صرفا ترجمه شده عین همون کتابی که به انگلیسی بوده یا به زبان‌های دیگه در مورد مثلا مسیحیت.
So, but then the philosophy of the university itself is not that. The philosophy is that we present the work as it is, and as accurately as possible, such that, for instance, in translating foreign language texts, doctrinal, et cetera, from, let's say, Christianity or Judaism. We don't provide any commentary or criticism or any notes even. It's exactly as we find it.
در واقع مؤسسین این دانشگاه همیشه تاکید میکنن که فقط میخوایم بدونیم و در واقع برای رسیدن به صلح و رفع سوء تفاهمات این چیزی که توی در واقع عوامی شناخته نیست و بدونیم که داوری بکنیم در واقع.
So essentially, as far as the founders are concerned, the mission of the university should be to understand and to produce knowledge, and that there's a notion that understanding can reduce the possibilities of misunderstanding and therefore to contribute to peace and coexistence.
The purpose of the university is not just to improve coexistence and peace between the religions and different denominations, or just knowing better and more different religions or different denominations. But the purpose is more complicated, which we call them producing comparative theology. And all the international program between our university and universities of Germany are programs are planned for producing comparative theology. Comparative theology, as you know, in the modern definition, is that you need different religions and different denominations for knowing yourself, your religion better. And for example, if you know something about Jesus Christ crucifixion, then you know Imam Hussein martyrdom better. Or there are some similar doctrines between religions and different denominations that can help them to know themselves better, not just the other religions better. And the program of the exchange program between University of Religion and Universities of Germany, for example, Paderborn and Potsdam and Goethe University in Germany, is a program like this. One program, the title was Tomb Rituals from the Comparative Perspective. Christianity, Judaism, Zoroastrianism, and Shia have some tomb rituals, and they are similar with each other. If in that program you know the other tomb rituals better, and also our tomb rituals better from knowing the other perspectives. And the other program which is held in University of Goethe some years ago, the title was Problem of Evil from the different perspectives between different religions, and I myself was participating in that program, and I think that in that time I know the problem of evil, which is my research subject, better. Then I know the other perspectives from the other religions about the problem of evil, the concepts of evil in the other religions, the figurations of evil in the other religions. And it is one of the more scientific purpose of for foundation of the University of Religions, not just peace and the coexistence.
Yeah, just I want to add, we have new project with one of the universities in Germany, University of Paderborn. We are reading some materials about Shia studies for them, for teaching in Paderborn University. Also vice versa. We are reading some materials about Christian theology for us, for teaching in our university. And after 3 years, of course, we had another project that we finished it. And I think we could trust to each other. And our new project is this: is writing some materials for each other. And also, when we already it, one of our professors go to Corridor and teach it. And after finalizing finalization of it is the material of Shia studies in Corridor, and also vice versa.
We have plenty of time for more questions. Frank.
So I have 2 questions actually. The first one is about the philosophy or the tradition of University of Religions and Denominations. Do you see it as something that derives out of a particularly Islamic or Iranian context? And by that I mean in the tradition of Akbar, Bina Elahi, and Azar Kebani, Dagestan Mazahir, or the Baha'i tradition in Iran? Or is it something that relates more to a kind of Religionswissenschaft, like a university type study of religion? Or indeed is it something that derives from the Christian ecumenical movement? That's one question. So I have another question, but let's ask that one.
Yeah, it has because especially the founder of the university was and is still very much involved in that the dialogue tradition and so on. So it could be influenced by the ecumenical tradition, but it's still more it is more influenced by that study of religions tradition that was in the West. And I think that one criticism that I have of the university is that it's not as organized and as systematic as it should have been. For example, although in Iran the religion and the state are not separate, the system is very much influenced by the American system. While we know that the American system is very much itself tied to this thing about the separation between religion and state. So I think that it is not as systematic as it should have been, simply because much of the Iranian institutions, many Iranian institutions have been borrowing this American system of studying in different fields, so they also have done that in religious studies. I don't think it is very Iranian. It is in many ways Western.
Can you give an example of what you mean by a problem in this?
Yeah, because in Europe, or let's say more particularly in the UK, because the religion and state are not separate, many of the clerics studying in the universities and seminaries and universities are not so separate. While in this University of Religions and also in the Iranian system more generally, it is very much like the American system, while in terms of the relationship between religion and state, they are not similar at all.
So the second question is, in terms of the Faculty of Shi'i Studies, I assume that in the classification that you described, the faculties that have been arranged, basically dividing the Abrahamic traditions and I think what you refer to as Eastern traditions, Hinduism and Buddhism. The Eastern traditions are in a way non-threatening vis-a-vis perhaps heterodox Shi'i traditions. So how does the Faculty of Shi'i Studies, either in its curriculum or in its discourse, deal with questions like, well, Ismaili tradition, or Aliullahis, or Baha'is, Bawis, Ahmadis? Is there a problem in addressing these kinds of questions in the context of your university in an academic way? Are there off-limits topics? You alluded earlier to the frustration about not doing very much sociological kind of or anthropological field work with religious traditions, but even just in an intellectual way, how problematic is the study of Shiism given that it's taking place in a wider context of a theocratic environment?
Yeah. We have courses on Zaidi theology and law and Islamic theology and law and different branches. The only topic that is excluded in teaching, while it is included, it can be included in research, is the highest Bahaism. In teaching, they aren't included because usually they have like security problems and so on, and political problems that the Iranian state has with these branches. But in the library you could find like the primary sources on the highest and the Bahaism. And otherwise everything is included. Also, this genealogical study, historical study that I referred to earlier, where you learn that certain doctrines just came in very late. Many times it's not part of the traditional learning, but in the Faculty of Shia Studies, they have rigorous, like historical work on different doctrines and different parts of the law, including the belief in the 12th Imam or the Layat al-Faqih or and different kinds of stuff. So, yeah.
But in teaching, we have the course
On Bahaism.
Yeah. Under the title of Islamic Shia sects.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. Shia sects, Shia denominations.
Sects?
So this is a heresiological context.
Is it then a heresiographical context?
They attack it. They criticize it. They don't say
No,
this is an offshoot and this is the development.
No, I can't find.
The students take their dissertation in this comparison between Shia and Baha'i comparison.
Really? Amazing change.
We have some professors who are experts in these subjects and in the Islamic denomination, the faculty of Islamic denomination, and also the faculty of the study of Shia. We have some courses about this.
Yeah, we have many resources about Bahaism that they write themselves, okay, in our university. But we didn't invite any professor from Bahaism community teachers in our university. But we have many resources.
And the title is
what is it? Chi?
Alludes to it. It's just referring. It's not explicit.
I see. Okay, so you have to stay with.
Yeah, but they know that what it refers to.
Well, that's an amazing improvement.
Did you have your hand up?
No, I haven't asked any questions. No, but can I?
Yes,
Is it anyone else?
There are plenty of questions.
All right.
I would just ask that you keep it short, but
it's not a comment. Well, maybe a bit of a comment. After all, I'm the oldest members of the Iranian society in the diaspora. I can tell you, at least academically, and I've seen amazing changes. Now, one of the changes I witnessed when I was living in Egypt, my father was working as attaché or something, was the effort of the Iranian government to create greater harmony between Sunni and Shia Islam, with Al-Azhar and the centers of Shia Islam in Iran. I left then to come to America to study. Is there any effort in this critical time in Middle Eastern history, in Islamic history, to try to create some greater bond or understanding between Shia Islam and Sunni Islam? I mean, Sunni Wahhabis say Shiites are heretics. Shia, from what I remember from my 6 years of life in Iran, they have Omar Koshan, Omar, they speak in the worst possible terms about Omar. And are these efforts making any inroads in trying to create more harmony between these two? Also, do you have any teachers coming from Al-Azhar, for instance, or from Saudi Arabia, one of these Shiite, hating teachers from, I don't know where they are in Riyadh or wherever, Jeddah, Do they come to teach in these schools, or there is no connection? One of the points that Hodgson mentioned was that one of the worst aspects of 19th century discovery of Europe for Muslims was they lost contact with other Muslims. The Shia look to Europe, the Sunnis look to Europe, but there is no contact between them. And this is such a great example. You have so much contact with Germany. Do you have any contacts with Al-Azhar or any other major Sunni schools? Please, because I think this is really a very important point I'm drawing for you young scholars who are very active in these centers. And I hope you can give me a bit of hope. And for you too. Sorry I gave a talk. But
No. It's good. It's a good question.
همونطور که شما گفتید درست هم گفتید واقعا یکی از مشکلات بزرگ خاورمیانه هم مشکلات اختلافات بین شیعه و سنی بوده و مثلا در شاید هند، پاکستان جاها خیلی شدیدتر هست
افغانستان
یا افغانستان و توی ایران خب خیلی کم یا تو عراق اما به هر حال ارتباطایی که ما حداقل داشتیم پارسال بکنم که دیداری رئیس دانشگاه ما به مصر داشت و دیداری با رئیس الازهر و تفاهم‌نامه ای رو قرار شد امضا کنیم برای یه تبادل استاد و اگر شما یک سرچ کوچیک در مورد رئیس دانشگاه انجام بکنید شاید سخنرانی خیلی زیادی در مورد نزدیک شدن شیعه و سنی داره و خودش میگه من شیعه سنی ام. میگه من هم شیعه هم سنی.
من هم شیعه سنی ام.
و سعی کرده که تا میتونه بر شما اگر مثلا محبوبیت ایشون در کامیونیتی های سنی ایران خیلی زیاده.
So let me just translate some of this for people who haven't been. So he is saying that he's confirming that indeed it is a problem that relationships between Shia and Sunni in the modern period has very much been influenced by sectarian difference. As far as their own university is concerned, there have been attempts for a long time to create connections and to approximations between the different sects. This includes recently the delegation from the university going to Al-Azhar and signing a statement with them. And there's been talk of exchanging professors and so on. And the founder of the university himself is, Mr. Saleh says, pretty popular with Sunni communities in Iran, in part because he's given a lot of talks in which he himself identifies, says, I'm a Shi'i Sunni, that I sort of don't place much emphasis on distinctions.
Darul Taqrib, that was the name of the program that started. The rise of Nasser ended it because he believed in Arab nationalism and he got into a fight with the Shah at the time. So it ended that.
But there's also like Mr. Tasiri's thing, right? The Majma Tabliq. There is also Majma Tabliq Mazahib that's been active for a long time.
But are they active? Because at the time, there's the man who represented this from Iran. He was very active. He was an Iranian. I don't know if he was a religious guy or not, but he was very active, very popular with Al-Azhar. And there was a chance to try to create some commonality of purpose between Sunnis and Shia. And of course, there was the Wahhabis. Nobody had heard of them at that time, in the 60s and 70s. But I mean, it seems a shame not to create that, especially with the Saudi money. I mean, spend the Saudi money expenditure on trying to destroy Shias. I mean, I don't know, they're very active anyway.
So it seems like there is some move afoot.
So, well, thank goodness. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course.
I want to sort of go back to the remarks by the first panelist and connect it together to the speeches or presentations. There was this the mentioning of the two-tier system of hawzah, and then there's a higher tier being Fiqh and Usul sometimes only, and all the other branches of study or disciplines fall in the lower tiers. And of course, there has been some reformations in approaches to Shi'i Fiqh and Usul, starting especially with Shaykh al-Islam study in the seems like the efforts that are being made by universities, like your university, are sort of beyond those Reformation efforts that have been made in the 19th and 20th century, and that it sort of mixes up the study of, let's say, traditional disciplines of hawzah with some of the disciplines that are coming from, let's say, Western scholarship or Western traditions of scholarship. Is there a trajectory imaginable for the Shi'i hawzah to have scholars who graduate from institutions such as yours and mix up their studies with their traditional hawzah studies to one day become actually high-level teachers in the hawzah and actually mix up these different disciplines in the higher tier of Shi'i scholarship, meaning
So can I rephrase a really short version of that question, which is, can modern scholarship on religion impact not just this kind of comparative religious study, but also something like fiqh and usul?
It was very much similar to what Al-Hamad said. And yes, why not? And I mean, our university is too young to see that, but we can expect to see that in the future. The students or the graduates can be future scholars of religion, and they can go back and, you know, when they have these topics in mind, they can renovate jurisprudence. So, for example, when in certain issues like stem cell research, like reproductive technology and so on, Iran or the religion scholars of religion in Iran have been trying to renovate and renew their methods and their findings in jurisprudence. So why not when it comes to different religions and from the findings of different religions? One example that I just mentioned was feminist approaches in the study of religion. So when you come across all those feminist efforts and feminist approaches in religion, and when they learn about that and then they go back to their sources and with new questions and so on in jurisprudence, so you can see the change happening, and we hope to see that and we expect to see that. Yeah.
Alison?
I was curious about in your universities, specific like texts and like traditions of scholarship coming from other religions or from Western secular thought that have become popular. You mentioned like the translation of the City of God or the popularity of analytic philosophy over continental philosophy. Do you see that as coming from the students' like own interests? Coming from what's available in the translations, or maybe what other professors have studied, and how that's, where you see that growing as your university continues to develop?
Yeah. First of all, American system is in any way very popular in Iran, and it could be related to language problems and so on, and also the historical influences that the U.S. has over a large part of the world, including Iran. But it is very important that what sources become available, whether in English or in Farsi. So, for example, German is a less accessible language, and therefore people are less familiar with a character like Jan Assmann. They are very much familiar with the developments in philosophy that happen in American institutions, or also theological developments that you can see in both British and American institutions. And the main thing is the question of language. It is, and also there are certain questions that are not necessarily Iranian questions. For example, the question of the question of immigration and the diversity of population. It's not so much the problem in Iran, or the question of different religions living together. It's not the question in central areas of Iran, while it's usually you find Sunni communities around the border of Iran. So while these are very important questions in, say, Europe, but the important questions are secularization, the relation between religion and state, or very much the intellectual debates on God, or like changing the problem of will and so on. These can influence the Iranian society much more than what many European debates about, for example, diversity, universality, particularity, and so on could be on.
I had two questions. And I remember a few years back when I was visiting the university, there were a group of students, graduate students, who had recently been sent by the university itself to do some preliminary field work in a village in Lebanon. And I remember the students were very much moved by that experience of getting the opportunity to actually, for some time, live with families who maybe the children had a mother who was Christian, a father who was Shia. They were both attending church, and they were perhaps, on Sundays going to church, on Fridays going to Jummah prayers. And their ability to kind of reconcile that and how they were at peace with it. And that seemed to be like a very influential experience for these students. And it was amazing to me that the university had kind of facilitated this trip for a group of men and women. And I was wondering, what was the reflection of that within the university, of the experience of the students? How did they respond to that? Has there been an effort to kind of expand projects like that, to send more students to other countries? Have they been traveling? I think they were going to go to Malaysia at some point. You could talk about these experiences of actual field work, which I think is very unique to this university. I'm not sure if there are other universities where students have had the chance to do projects outside of Iran in this way. That was one question. Another one was about, can I ask that quickly about research centers? Is that, the various marajah, the various jurisprudence in Iran have their own research centers, magnificent research centers where they do all kinds of research on topics, comparative studies, Christian approaches to stem cell research versus Muslim approaches to stem cell research, all kinds of stuff about reproductive technologies, very similar to the kinds of work that, faculty are probably doing at your university. And I wanted to know more about the kind of collaborative relationship between those research centers and university, and do you feel that the university has been kind of influential in moving these research centers to explore particular topics in a way kind of following the path of the university, or were they already engaged in these very modern topics, researching comparative approaches to these modern topics even before the existence of the university, which was 20 years in Oregon? So یکی در مورد سفر خارجی، یکی در مورد ریسرچ سنتر.
سفر خارجی نه فقط با استادان، سفر خارجی که مثلا
تحقیقات
مثلا که چجور چجور نظرهای در موردش بعداً بوده، چجوری بهش نگاه شده و اینکه همچین چیزایی باز برنامه هست یا قرار توسعه بده.
من فکر کنم اول بحثم گفتم خود رئیس دانشگاه مثلا ایده تأسیس این دانشگاه و سفرهای خودش می‌بینه به کشورهای مختلف دنیا. تقریبا میگه من شاید بیشتر از 90% کشورهای دیدم. بعد از همون ابتدا هم تشویق می‌کرد دانشجوها رو که به کشورهای دیگه برن. بعضا رسمی خودش حمایت مالی می‌کرد و بعضی‌ها هم سعی می‌کردن از جای کمک بگیرن و اینها رو بفرستن و برن به سفرهایی که مثلا حالا بتونن تحقیقات میدانی داشته باشن در دریاها دیگه و حتی کورسایی بتونن شرکت بکنن در دانشگاه‌های دیگه همراه با دیگران. این ضعفی که تو ایران هست این نبود در واقع یک جور مولتی کالچر نبودن ایران هست که نیاز هست بیشتر بریم بیرون و این اتفاق افتاده و هنوز هم حتی تو شرایط اقتصادی شاید بگیم نچندان خوب داره حمایت میشه.
So the president of the university, the founder of the university himself emphasizes the need for students to be traveling to other countries living with other societies, getting to know them, and taking classes with them at the university level. And he says that he himself has visited many different countries, and the university has been promoting this either by encouraging students to seek funding from within the university or to seek outside funding to do this kind of sort of field-based research or study abroad, and so on. Even during difficult economic times, it hasn't completely, so during the sanctions period, it hasn't completely died, so that they still are encouraging this. And Mr. Saudi thinks it's really necessary, given that a kind of a multicultural understanding isn't as common in Iranian society as it should be. And so these kinds of trips would be very useful. سوال دوم در مورد که مراکز تحقیقاتی که مراجع دارن تا چه حدی ارتباط دارن با دانشگاهی مثل دانشگاه شما و تا چه حدی دانشگاه مثل شما مثلا تأثیر میذارن تو نوع مثلا مسئله سازی‌هایی که اونجا اتفاق میفته، نوع فکری که دارن اونجا.
شاید بگیم چند جور هست. بعضیشون رابطه خوبی با ما دارن و بعضی‌ها نه.
So there's different kinds of relationships between research centers that are tied to the offices of the Marajit, the high-ranking jurisconsults, and the university. Some of them have good relations and others don't.
بعضی انتقادهای جدی دارن، بعضی‌ها اعمالی رو تعیین می‌کنن و سعی می‌کنن ارتباطشون مخصوصا تو بحث‌های ارتباطات بین‌المللی دارن به این میرسن که واقعا نیاز بوده به یک همچین جایی و حتی سعی می‌کنن که این ارتباطشون رو مثلا نزدیک‌تر کنن.
So some of these other centers are seriously critical of the work that their university does, and others are gradually coming to the realization that they need the kind of work that they're doing, and in particular to be engaged in international collaboration through the medium of this university, which has already established these kinds of relations.
نمیدونم همه باید جواب بدن یا در مورد نکته دیگه
شاید در مورد مثلا موضوع ما فکر کنیم که در مورد موضوعهایی که تحقیق بشه، چون من دیدم مثلا کتاب هست در مورد نگرش هم مسیحیت، یهودیت به مثلا مسئله سمسل مقایسه‌اش با تجربه سنی و شیعه. آیا این چیزای جدیدیه به نظرتون یا یه چیزی که از در واقع شاید تاثیر گرفته از دانشگاه ادیان هست یا یک ترندی، یک حرکتی که از قبل وجود داشته قبل از خود وجود دانشگاه ادیان؟
So now I find myself translating the question as well.
You're doing a good job.
So the question, the follow-up was not only on the issue of international collaboration, but also in the kinds of research that these other centers are doing. I had noticed that there are books that have been published on, say, comparative approaches to stem cell research. So between Christian, different sort of Christian denominations, Jewish, Muslim approaches to stem cell research. She's asking whether this kind of scholarship, which is happened outside of the university, has been influenced by the approach of the university, or whether there's something that pre-existed the university and there's kind of a convergence of interests and methods.
They are rather independent, especially because they have different missions, they have different things to do, and sometimes you see similar stuff and parallel stuff being done without any relationship. And perhaps your question prompts us to develop more relationship between these institutions in Qom.
Yes, please.
So your research center is responsible for a lot of translation work. How do you decide what to translate? Is there is it because you want to teach a particular text, or as just you think it's necessary?
Yeah, sometimes it is related to teaching, but not all the time. They think that a certain figure is very important and they try to translate their word. Or also primary text, like sacred texts and so on. So I myself translated the Book of Mormon into Farsi.
Okay.
The play or the
yeah, translated the translation into Farsi. I wanted to make it available for researchers. And also there have been other primary texts being translated into Farsi, but there are also textbooks and sometimes monographs being translated. Not all is it's not always meant for teaching, but also for research and people who are interested to learn about different religions.
Could I ask something about enrollment? Let's say also, is the university public or privately endowed? I get the impression some private individual created it, but is it being supported? Is it now a public institution? So do you have to pay tuition?
Yeah, they do pay tuition.
I see. So it's a private.
Clerics in masters.
Because this is very important.
Clerics studying in masters don't pay tuition. They are exempt, but others pay.
Okay. Now, would they the hawzah, let's say, seminary? Do they take women? Or is it let's say, male, female?
Yeah, we have both studied in seminaries, but
with men.
The schools are segregated. So we attended a private and a different institution from the men, and our students were women only. They were women only, but theirs are men only. And you have male teachers in women's institutions. You don't have female teachers in men's institutions.
You don't. So
they are, especially because they are self-sufficient. They don't need women to teach. But I'm looking forward to a time when women feel so believe in themselves and trust in their own power, so that they can teach.
Can you interact with the male, let's say, students? Can you have discussions, or is it complete? Completely.
Is this about the university or about the seminary?
No, at this hawzahs and
no, not in the seminaries. But the university is co-ed, and we both.
I know universities,
but
not
the University of Religions, where most of the students are clerics. They come from the hawzah system, but in this university, it's co-ed, and we teach there, and we have both female and male students in co-ed classes.
Let me ask you a question, if perhaps the last one. I don't know if there are others who have not asked questions. Okay, so this will be the last question. I'm cognizant of the need for you to eat, myself also to eat, and perhaps all of you. Something that Dr. Pourmohammadi mentioned, which I thought was really interesting, was the fact that in the traditional hawzah system, you have a dual emphasis on both scholarship and virtue, right? And this idea that as students study together, there's that they build those things together at the same time.
They reinforce.
They reinforce one another. So the universities, of course, this is a critique of one of the critiques of modern education from various quarters, including kind of communalist types of understanding, or communitarian kinds of critiques, is that the modern university does not emphasize virtue in the same way as before, right? At least virtue is not something that is taught from within a particular kind of tradition. Even though in some ways you could say it is without it getting that name. Like, in the United States, it's liberal arts education, depends on certain kinds of virtues like tolerance, respect for the views of others, and so on and so forth, and increasingly other kinds of things that are, in the U.S. there's issues of multiculturalism, and so on and so forth. So my question is there a certain kind of understanding of the need for the promotion of certain virtues at the University of Religion?
What are the virtues?
And what are those virtues, and how do you practically speak about and strategize about how those virtues might be promoted, or perhaps how a kind of an atmosphere might be created for those virtues to grow sort of organically from interactions among the student and faculty?
Good question.
I think the only difference from other institutions would be the virtue of tolerance, which is important, and also the being open to different traditions, not judging them, and trying to learn about them without judging them. That's the main virtue. So once you see a student who is judging other traditions and without opening themselves to learn about them, so that would count as a vice.
Yes.
But then do you promote the other virtues? I mean, are there ways that you foster the other virtues that are promoted within the seminary? So
I don't think so.
It's
secular in that sense.
Well, let's thank our guests.